In the year 21X, Lord Boxman opened a store to arm his robot horde. But the heroes of Lakewood Plaza
are ready to fight! KO Renegade are in battle mode. Punch and kick the bad guys till they all explode. Power up and fight, let's watch an episode of Lakewood
Podcast
Turbo!
Actually, since it's above ground, it's called lava, not magma. In this week's episode of Lakewood Podcast Turbo, I'm your host, Wyatt, and you'll never melt my icy hearts. Who is here with me today, as always?
It's Buster, Corp, and here to honor the first appearance of the GOAT, Red Action.
Yeah. Yeah, because, Red Action, I was surprised to see she was in the pilot.
Yeah,
right?
she was
like
in the
as a
pilot,
background character, and I was like, "Oh shit," because the pilot, like, some of the characters look pretty much the same, but some of them are like quite different designs. But like the fact that this is the first, like, these episodes are the first real, or this third episode especially is the first real appearance of Red Action.
Speaking roles.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, obviously, with our interests, our shared interest in, tokusatsu and superhero time shows and everything, like, Red Action was, like, a huge... It took until the Back in Red Action episode, like, later in the season, for me to realize, oh, shit, she's the Red Ranger. But...
Like, same. Like, she just kind of looks like just a cyberpunk Mega Man character here.
Yeah, when the other... we'll talk about that when we get there. But, like, when the other Rangers showed up, I was so... I was just, like, sending the clip over to all of my friends and being like, look, it's the thing from the thing we like.
Big mood. That's just a big mood.
Very, soying out, basically. I'm the guy that everybody on 4chan hates, where I just, like, I look at the references and I'm like, whoa, oh my god, the reference. Actually,
speaking of references, like, in side characters, I really like the two action bros, or like the I forgot their names, the monk and the military guy.
Yeah.
I love how they're, like, basically, like, two opposing forces of action toy lines from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
You got, like, the G.I. Joe XP, and then you got, like, a monk kind of representing the kung fu side of, like, that was blowing up in America
Mortal
at the time.
Kombat, sort of, like, that kind of thing. Yeah, for sure. Because, like, ninjas and stuff, I mean, obviously, Shaolin monks and ninjas are not related. But, like, just, like, the Asian sort of, like, that was, like, really big in the 80s for some reason. Yeah. Along with, like Big Trouble in Little China and stuff like that, which was, like, Mortal Kombat ripped off profusely Big Trouble in Little China. But, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about episodes 3 and 4 of OK KO, Let's Be Heroes. The middle section of this opening arc of KO's first week. And episode 3, boarded by Dave Allegri and Haewon Lee. I'm not actually super familiar with Haewon. Dave Allegri, though, I do follow him on Twitter. He is a fantastic, totally insane artist. And, like, it's like he's one of those...
That can mean many things.
That's true. Yeah. Well, he's one of those artists where, like, as soon as you know, like, what you're looking for, it's, like, so obvious when he's doing a scene. Just because, like, his sense of humor and his sense of style and everything are so, like, idiosyncratic. So, yeah, I mean, episode 3 feels like a natural extension of the first 2 episodes, which was, like, the first day at the plaza, and this is like, oh, this is the next day. KO's going around. He wants to prove to Enid that, like, helping people and being nice to them will make you feel good and will better your life and their lives and everything. I think this episode's, like, really cleverly constructed.
Yeah, it's basically just a good excuse to just meet a bunch of the residents of the bodega. We get a bit more elaboration on Real Magic Skeleton and his bear friend, Brendan.
Brandon, yeah.
Brandon does.
Yeah, I love those characters quite a bit, especially the focus episode they get later in the season.
Yeah,
I think
very excited to cover that.
I think that, like, it's awesome that by the end, you know, to jump ahead just a little bit, when he's like helping Red Action and Droop and Greg, like he's using things that he like already, like he helped these other characters up to that point, and all of those characters like come into play to help them, like these bully, like sort of like
it all ties together.
Like it was, it's like oh wow, that's a surprisingly tightly written like script and everything, you know, especially for a board driven show which doesn't have a script. You know, they have like an outline, but you know, the board writers are the ones who write it, essentially.
That's some new info to me, and honestly, that just makes everything like in the show make sense, because it does feel very spontaneous and very like what would work well right now. You know?
So like a show like Gravity Falls or Amphibia are script driven, so it's like script first, then the boards like bring those scenes to life. Whereas like board driven is like you're given an outline and then you have to kind of whole cloth create it, so it leads to like less structure but more like expression, and I think like both have their positives, you know, and like Ian worked on Venture Bros, which there is a connection in this episode, and that's like very like script heavy, very like the, you know, Jackson Public and Doc Hammer like fine tuned, you know, every one of these scripts and everything, but you know, I think OK KO, like, it's definitely in the same DNA as Adventure Time, which is board-driven, and Steven Universe, which is also board-driven, which is why it has, like, sort of a loose, off-model style to it. And, I don't know, I think this episode, like, I don't know, that it has, it's, like, the first one where it becomes very clear how off-model it is, because... Like
I was going to mention, because a common criticism lobbied at this show is, oh, it's too off-model, but, like, why is that a bad thing when it looks good?
Yeah, I agree. Like, Dave Allegri just has, like, a very distinct art style when, like, drawing the characters and drawing expressions and everything. Like, that, like, it looks quite a bit different from the previous two episodes, which were, as we said before, still, like, goofy and, like, crazy action sort of things, but like this one feels like a little bit more wacky as far as like style goes.
Well, like, it's a vibe episode, because there's not really any action scenes. I mean, KO gets like lava, like Mario, like wow, like with the whole like jumping up and down. But like it's just like the first of many just vibe episodes where there doesn't need to be an action scene. They're just like characters going through the motions. That's fun.
These two episodes are like, let's chill out, you know, let's just have like slice of life sort of episodes, and there's like character development that happens, you know, like Enid like gets a little, like she has her icy heart melted just a little bit. We see like her crush on Red Action, you know, we see that Red Action goes from being like this angry sort of like standoffish punk, you know, to somebody that's like, oh, maybe she's not just like a bully, it's like maybe something happened to her that caused her to be like mean and angry, you know, like lashing out at others, you know, and it was like the shitty haircut that she got.
Oh yeah, like that haircut was bad, man. That was like, I know it was purposely bad, but oh god.
Yeah, it's very funny that like it's weird because we have no frame of reference really for her character. So that's like, oh, that's the first time that we see her is with like this crazy mohawk. James Urbaniak is Mr. Logic, who is James Urbaniak is Doc Venture and Venture Bros, as well as Phantom Limb and some other characters in Venture Bros. So like that's like that feels like a big connection, like a throwback to like, oh, Ian's like the beginning of his work in the industry, you know, he was writing and doing stuff for Venture Bros. So it feels, I don't know, it just feels like, OK KO honors all parts of Cartoon Network, including Adult Swim, you know, not just like the children's block, but also like there's some DNA of Adult Swim in there.
Yeah, I think especially like in the creativity that the show brings, like you could really feel that 2000s Adult Swim energy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and like Venture Bros is another world where it's like, oh, here's all these characters that are like parodies of either well-known tropes or superheroes and things like that, you know, just a big toy box sort of world. So it totally fits. Like, it feels like maybe he came up with the OK KO idea from, like, maybe the germ of the idea came from working on Venture Bros.
Yeah, I can see that. Actually, like, speaking of Dr. Logic, I do like him, like, quite a bit. He's, like, a very minor character. I don't think he gets a focus episode, like, ever? I could be wrong.
He gets one.
There's
the
okay.
Lad and Logic episode where we learn about like that he was a Boxmore bot originally.
Oh, okay. Well, that's way down the line. But like, yeah, he's just nice to see. He's just like a nice guy to just pop up and be like, "Hey, what a friendly face." And that's kind of like what a bodega kind of like. It just the vibe of those bodega is just so fun. It's like it feels like the Springfield from The Simpsons, where it's like, oh, there's a friendly or wacky face on every corner, you know?
Yeah, and like we start to see more reoccurring characters. Like, you know, Potato and Colewort. They're some of my favorites. You know, just, I mean, we'll talk about this as we go, like, as we get way deeper into the show. But, like, I always like, you know, similar to Chowder, I like when a show has, like, a child protagonist, but they're amongst adults or, like, older people. But they also have, like, secondary characters that they interact with that are, like, their same age. So, like, in Chowder, there's, like, Panini and Gorgonzola and, what the fuck's his name? The other kid. But, like, whose name is leaving me right now. But, like, to me, like, I always loved seeing that, like, these little peeks into, like, oh, what's KO's world outside of, like, Rad and Enid and Mr. Gar and everything, you know, like, who are these younger characters? So, like, yeah, Colewort and Potato, who's the bunny, and Colewort is the broccoli, you know, like, those characters. And then,
like, wasn't there a joke? Was it this episode or a different episode where there was a joke about him eating broccoli? And it's like, it's not weird.
Yeah, I don't know if it was this episode, but, like, I can't remember. But I do think, you know, they could have done more with that, and I know they had plans to do more with it in, like, season 3. Like, Fink would have joined, like, KO school and, like, because they're, you know,
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's I'll leave the spoilers out, but, like, they become entangled in some way, and you know, like, it would have been like, oh, it's funny that KO, who was, like, a cool guy that everybody loved at school, Fink comes in and then, like, turns the school against him in some way. Like, that's just, like, a very fun, that sounds like a fun idea for an episode. But season 3, they had to cut it in half, and they had to, like, restructure everything to be, like, all juice, just, like, completely, you know, very plot driven with season 3.
Yeah, it was like the epilogue to everything.
So we sort of, like, lose out on episodes like this, where it's just, like, slower paced, more vibe episodes, some more, like, I don't know, I feel like there are things in this episode that feel, like, not necessarily outdated, but, like, wouldn't really ever come up again, like KO's face changing to, like, these, like, detailed anime faces. Stuff
it was still early on in the show, and it's like they're experimenting, like, what do we want to keep, what do we not want, you know?
That's what it feels like. And, like, that feels like it was supposed to be more of a thing, because in the game, like, he would occasionally go into, like, this, like, detailed anime sort of, like, solid snake face at certain points, like, during dialogue scenes. And, like, you know, the game and the show, like, season 1, were being developed at the same time but separately, so maybe, like, there was some element of, like, the Bible where, like, that was kind of like a visual thing, and it was, like, in a couple of these early episodes, but it really doesn't appear again, and it's kind of weird to see it, like,
with how board driven OK KO is, I just assumed the board artist just like, I want to do this instead.
Yeah, exactly. Like, like, I can write it off as that, but I wonder if it was, like, an intentional, like, oh yeah, this is the thing that KO does sometimes, but because it just, like, doesn't really come up again, but it is in that game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed, like, I think it's great to have this episode that's a, it's kind of an Enid KO episode. And
it shows how good of a boy KO is.
Yeah,
outside of fighting.
Next episode we'll be doing a Rad KO episode. So it's cool that like this batch has Enid, and then the next batch has Rad. So we kind of like get the full spectrum here. But because episode 4 is like an ensemble episode, like all 3 of the characters are interacting, and we have Stephanie Nadolny as KO again. A lot of these episodes were produced out of order, but then were assembled into a specific order, essentially. Like you actually shouldn't, like a lot of times in cartoons, you should watch it in production order because like they're intentionally made to be like, okay, this is the plot follows this progression and we make this episode then this one. But like OK KO was actually made out of order so that the first set of episodes could be better than like the first episodes that air could be better than the first ones that they produced. So that like comes into play here, where like this also feels like very much like a short that's kind of like expanded in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like Mr. Gar trying to get him, and like that happens in like a couple shorts that I've watched of the show. So
yeah, I'm not pissing. I was just pouring a little bit of water.
I don't think Discord caught that, but
I know my microphone did. So there you go. But yeah, this episode I think is like really funny, regardless of the fact that it's like not. I mean, there is some important plot stuff in it, or some important like character stuff as well. This is the first time we see the sandwich flashback.
Yeah, the Cowboy Bebop sandwich reference that turns into a whole thing.
I
didn't even know it was a Cowboy Bebop thing. I just thought it was like, oh, sandwich.
Yeah, I didn't know, like, because I know I'm a heathen here, but I never watched Cowboy Bebop before watching this show. So back in 2017, I wasn't aware it was a reference to anything until like hearing it in a podcast. And I was like, oh, okay, it's a reference to Cowboy Bebop. Cool. And then
and that's like what I love about the show's references. They're so broad enough that like, if you just look at it from just without the reference, it's just a fun visual gag or just like cool foreshadowing.
Yeah.
But like if you know it, it enhances it even further. It's like it doesn't rely on your knowledge. It's just a thing.
Yeah, that's something like we didn't touch on with the pilot, but like I really like how all of their power moves are like attached to like different parts of their body. So like, Enid has the foot, and Rad with like the finger, and then KO with the fist. And like the fist, like the shooting out the blue energy thing, it's kind of like a Hadouken, it's kind of like the Kamehameha, but it's not quite like either of them. It's sort of, I don't know, like it's evocative of those without being like literally he's not putting his hands together and then thrusting them forward.
It's its own move. Although I think it kind of reminds me of Pokken Tournament. I don't know what character, but I know there's like a visual similar to that in Pokken.
Maybe Lucario just because of his aura moves.
Yeah, I think it was Machamp, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, possibly. I think it also kind of reminds me of the Pegasus Ryusei Ken from Saint Seiya. So there you go.
There's another one on my list of things I need to watch.
Yeah. I think the whole manga it's on the Viz app, like on the Shonen Jump app.
Yeah, I do have a subscription to that because I was reading One Piece. So,
but yeah, I like another thing. The President of the Universe was introduced here, like as a picture. Like, I didn't know Gar knew the President of the Universe. That's a character that was supposed to be in Secret Mountain Fort Awesome.
I think they appeared in like one episode.
Yeah, but like didn't like they just like repurposed this character and put it into OK KO, which is like that's awesome. That like I love when stuff like that happens. I made like a whole video about it on my channel about like how the creators of Craig of the Creek made the Creek Elders. Like they made like a bunch of YouTube videos with those characters like a decade before they would then appear in Craig of the Creek, and they're like much better as side characters than they are as like main characters.
Oh, 100%.
Because like as main characters, they're just, it's like, you know, it's kind of like
Dude, bro.
Welcome to Eltingville, you know, like that pilot or that comic and everything, where it's like, yeah, these characters are fun because they're horrible, but like they're more fun when you get them as like weird, like
Foils.
Adult jokes. Like, yeah, they're like vehicles for like adult humor in a children's show, you know, for Craig of the Creek. So it's just like they're fun surprises whenever they show up. You know, you have the episode where like Barry is hanging out with Craig and JP, and he's just like trying to relate to them with like old like 90s and 2000s Cartoon Network shows, and they're like, no, we don't know what SWAT Cats is. We don't care about this stuff. And that's just like, that's a funny episode because it just reminded me of myself.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, but yeah, man, this
there's a puppet show in this episode, which like, Enid pulls off, and Gar like looks cute, and it just like that I don't know why, that just such a, like a 2-second gag, but it just makes me smile. I just love puppets.
Similarly, like when they're having the like imagined spots of the like Gar being disappointed in them, that gets into the disappointment zone, which is hell.
Yeah.
The disappointment zone does come back at the very end of the series, where you know, Pow B Cardio or whatever, that like the guy who runs the Pow Card company like gets sent to hell in the final episode.
Forgot about that. There's so much going on in that.
Yeah, but also Shai Hulud from Dune is in the disappointment zone, like a giant sandworm. So there you go. You know.
Yeah.
Got that in there. But yeah, I love it's such a stupid, almost like a dumb waste of time sort of like plot line of KO going to his mom and being like, you need to take this picture, and then her being like, oh, well, I can't fit into the Silver's, you know, Spark outfit anymore. You have to wear it and pretend to be me. And that's like, they get caught before they can even fake the picture, and then KO immediately admits that they broke the picture. So like that plot line just like went nowhere, and then KO's just like, oh yeah, I found another picture, you know, for Gar.
Yeah, more teasing of their past. So that's cute.
Oh yeah, no, I think like, despite the fact that this is like mostly like kind of a comedic sort of episode, could come off as like fillery. Like those little, like the sandwich flashback, and then like the moment where Gar puts the picture into his desk and we see him as Elbow with Silver Spark, like together, like, you know, smiling, it like immediately is like, oh, okay, they do have like this, you know, deep past, you know, when they were younger together. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's a good episode. What can you say? There's only so many ways I could say episode good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like Gar, his relationship with Carol could have been like annoying or tedious, but I think it was like handled really well throughout the whole show.
Oh yeah, it's a really cute relationship. It never gets like too creepy or just, it's also it always comes off as wholesome.
Yeah, especially when like, it's just fun to see like such a badass buff character like him, like, you know, kind of crumple whenever he's approached with the girl that he likes. And it's like multiple layers of like, oh, it's the girl that he likes, but she also went off with a different guy, you know, which he's not like angry about necessarily, he's just sad. And it makes it awkward, you know, which I think is like a good,
that's relatable, I can be honest.
Yeah. And then he, like, the fact that, I don't know, the fact that it never feels like he's like owed her, you know, just because he was a nice guy or anything like that. Like, that makes him really sympathetic. And it, again, there's like the different layers where like he's partially responsible for Laser Blast, you know, getting caught in like this big explosion, being presumed dead and everything. And like, yeah, the more that we like learn about like the backstory, it becomes clear like, oh, the reason he's so cripplingly anxious around Carol isn't just his crush on her. It's like the entirety of the baggage that they have of their past together. But it's clear that Carol has kind of moved on, but he hasn't yet. Like, he's still like traumatized by it, but she's moved on. She has KO, you know, she has just like, yeah, my boyfriend, he's dead. It sucks. I have moved on. You know, I've raised this child, and he's now like the light of my life. And like KO sort of represents Gar's failure to have like gotten the girl in a way. So like the fact that he's willing to like be apprentice KO, you know, like be his like mentor and everything is like, again, it begins as a sort of like, oh, there's maybe like an awkward sort of standoffish relationship. You know, he's sort of like a Hank Hill kind of guy, unable to confront his emotions. But the fact that he like is able to like take that step and then, you know, start to like mentor KO, and then eventually like he grows this sort of like paternal bond with him. Then we get to season 2 where it begins with like, oh, over the summer Carol and Gar started dating, and then
we're getting like way ahead. We're getting way ahead.
But like the fact that it like gets to that point is like, oh wow, that's like, it
speaks a lot for those good characteristics.
Yeah, and it would also like, it shows how much they like care about the characters. Yeah, that like they want to progress and move them forward instead of like keeping them in the same status quo, never changing. Just like any other show would have had like that be something that maybe was implied at the very end of the show,
or they would just keep hitting the reset button like freaking comic books do, and like comic book universes.
Yeah,
you know.
Like I can't tell you how happy I was, for example, in like Steven Universe Future, that they're like, oh no, we have like fully committed to Steven and Connie being a couple.
Yeah,
you know, it's like shit. It's just nice. It's just nice to have that happen, and it doesn't make either character worse, you know. And it's
but like when I went to go see Dragon Ball Superhero in theaters, I just like seeing like, oh, like these characters that like, oh, I saw on the TV, they're growing up, you know. That's my favorite part of like Dragon Ball. It's like when you see characters grow up and like, oh, they have like families and shit. It's like that's adorable.
I love Gohan when he's, you know, fighting Vegeta and, you know, all that stuff, but like Gohan as a dorky father is like, oh, that's awesome. You know, seeing like him grow up and become that character, seeing Goku go from like dumb, foolish kid to becoming like a noble, responsible warrior. I know Super has kind of maybe ruined Goku's characterization a little bit here and there, but we won't get into that. I could go on a whole tangent about that, and we will not. I promise.
Not today.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think like these are just like really good, really solid, you know, episodes, with episode 4 being like a standout because it comes off as sort of a filler episode, but has so much like
underlying
character work.
It's like, a great rewatch episode
for sure. Like episode 3 as well. Like, you know, like you can interpret Enid getting like flustered about Red Action in many different ways, but now with the show being over, you're like, oh, like this is the beginning of her crush on Red Action. You know, she's following her on social media and everything. So yeah, I don't know, like just good stuff. This opening arc of episodes I think is like a brilliant idea, because it all feels like it's all like tightly connected, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know, you can also just like watch an episode on its own. Like you can watch either one of these episodes on their own without having watched 1 or 2 or 5 and 6.
Yeah, but that's just the strength of this show, where it's like these episodes, they all connect, but like they still have enough standalone content and context that's like, I could just put this on for anybody.
Oh, one thing in the notes I want to mention before we wrap up is that speaking of Universe Future, the ending of the episode 3, I love the fact that KO doesn't succeed to like change the hearts of Red Action and Droop, but actually does kind of succeed to like, you know, for Greg the bird. And that reminds me of the Lapis episode of Steven Universe Future, right, where they go to the planet that there's these two Lapises that they're terraforming it, and like the whole episode is our Lapis trying to convince them, like, yo, stop doing this shit, and like come to Earth, be happy, you know, join the homeschool and everything. And then at the end, like the one of them is like, whatever, this sucks. But then another, like the second one comes and is like eager and curious about like learning more. And like, so even if you didn't change everyone's hearts, you can still touch somebody in some small way and change them. And that's like a really cool, you know, a message to have, like, especially like this early on in the show, that like, yeah, KO isn't like a perfect wonderkind who can just like bring joy and happiness to everybody. Sometimes he's just like, sometimes people are just, you know,
jerks.
They're jerks. They need more time for you to like break through their shell. But, you know, that doesn't mean it's not worth trying, because sometimes you do get through to people you otherwise didn't know you could. So
yeah, good ass lesson. And it's like, I know people complain about mortals in old ages shows, like especially like teenagers. Like, I feel like a lot of teenage audience, they're like, anytime they see a moral in a show, no matter how well executed it is, they're like, no, I don't want to learn. Because
I think like morals are just like a quantity of modern cartoons.
Yeah.
Just like in any show, like even in like Amphibia, every single episode ends with a moral. You know, Big City Greens, you know, those shows, like they all end and they all have like a lesson and a moral and everything. And I think there are some older viewers that are like, just the very idea of it bothers them. But one, since I think it is like a known quantity, it doesn't bother me. And two, I think for the most part, these are like, cause I'm viewing it as an outsider, right? I'm not the target demographic, yet I can enjoy it because they crafted it so finely. I can see and appreciate these morals on the level of like, what are the lessons that are being told to children, and like how smartly are they treating children, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's very important to me. That's why I love a show like Bluey, is because it just treats children as really smart and like creative and curious, instead of like, it's not like completely dumbed down to like very simplified stories that are like almost meaningless. You know, like kids should learn very simple stories at the earliest parts of their life, but when they're at the point where they're like watching and comprehending television and stories, they can accept and like, you know, fall in love with like more complicated ideas, and they're like way more perceptive than anybody is like willing to give them credit for.
like freaking I was freaking percepting as 10 years old. I was like freaking uncovering Kingdom Hearts lore, you know, like, like 10-year-olds, they want like things to chew on, you know.
Mm-hmm. For me, like, you know, bring it back to Metroid here, like the first Metroid game I ever played was 2 on the Game Boy. A lot of people say like, oh, it's too old, it's too cryptic, I don't know, like it's a Game Boy game, it's just kind of like devoid of life or purpose. Just play Samus Returns, that kind of interprets everything in a more like consistent, coherent way. I say, like, I came away with that game kind of like as a 6-year-old understanding what it was doing. The idea of, even if not fully, the idea of going into a planet and like eradicating an entire race at the end, and the moral quandary of like, was that the right thing to do? Was it the right thing to do to go into a mother's nest and kill her, despite the fact that she's only trying to protect her last child? Yeah. You know, like that's like, that kind of thing, like, was something I was able to glimpse as a child. So in Japan, kids were just a witness to Don Brothers for an entire year. So
my profile pic on Discord is just Don Brothers. So it's like,
so yeah, that's the rant I wanted to go on, is that I think kids, like, even with these like moral lessons and everything, like, one, I think OK KO does it in a way that doesn't feel patronizing, But I also, in general, am totally fine with morals, and I think as long as they are like well constructed and like
they're like a story tool. Like
exactly.
They're
a tool. Yes, perfect. All right. Yeah. I think that'll do it for this episode of Lakewood Podcast Turbo. Buster, why don't you tell us where we can find you?
Hi, I'm Buster Corp. You can find me at the YouTube channel Buster Corp. I cover too much shit to name here, but like we were just talking about Don Brothers. I do have a Don Brothers video, and it's one of my favorite ones because that's one of my favorite Sentai. So it's like, of course, getting to talk about it is super fun. You can also find me at Twitter at Buster. Yeah, it's really good. Like Buster Boy 3 on Twitter. I'm also at Tumblr because why not? I mostly reblog cool art, but like if you want to follow me, there's Buster's Corp. Also, just send me ask questions. I want to get more questions, even just stupid shit. Just don't want to like reply to it in funny ways, you know.
Ask us questions on this podcast, and we'll answer them. We'll be like,
hey, if just specify like answer this question on the podcast if you send us questions.
But you can find me at youtube.com/ or whatever, It's Only Magic. I do like cartoon retrospectives, personal retrospectives on cartoons, not really reviews necessarily, but they are, just like videos where I'm talking about my experience with a thing and how it relates to my life, while also explaining why I think a thing is good. I try not to do negative videos because I don't know. I just don't feel like I don't feel like doing negative videos, really. I've written a couple, and then I just never produced those scripts. Because it's just like, but you can find me on twitter.com/WazRanger. That's WAZP Ranger. A lot of stream of consciousness stuff that you get from Twitter, but you can get updates on what's going on with me, videos that I'm making, and even stuff about this podcast. So I think that'll do it for this episode of Lakewood Podcast Turbo. I've been your host, Wyatt. That's Buster. We'll see you next week as we talk about episode 5 and 6, the end of this first arc, KO's first week. See you there.
I give it a 7.5.
7.5?
Now, if you'll excuse me.